also that even LA culture and is exported. LA culture is exported to the
and
world.
exploited. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
excluded, right? So, so when you think about your culture and where you are located geographically, and the people around you, and your neighbors, and your fellow, um, people within your circle, I'm pretty confident when you travel and you go abroad or even domestically, there's a part of like LA that exists other places around the world. So I feel like that component of culture is exported. And sort of like now, I think the next question becomes like, what parts of other cultures are we really like? I think it's just like at this point, it's a huge gumbo. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Like,
listen, I understand what you're saying. So when I was deployed to Africa in 1990, the first time in 1992, um, I came back. No, it's the second time. It's the second time I was deployed. And I came back, and that's when I decided to never leave food on my plate. Before I would eat, you go to a restaurant, we go to a party. After the party, we go to Denny's or whatever, and then you order some food and you just leave half the food, throw it away. I was young, I was 21, 22 years old. And then when I went to Africa, I realized, oh, I'm never wasting food again. Then I started telling people, I encourage everybody to travel, get out of your environment and go explore, go travel, go at least one place overseas. There's a lot of people that's never left their city, much less the state that they're in, much less the country. And so I've always encouraged people to go explore because I got a culture shock when I went to Africa. And so from then on, I don't waste no food. It's either I don't order as much as I used to, or I eat everything that's brought to me, or I take it home and make sure I eat it. That's something that I had to learn. So what you're saying is everybody should go out and experience cultures from other places to be well-rounded individuals. I believe that. And yes, uh, here in California, our culture is exploited and exported. Black people's culture is exploited and exported and sold by others than ourselves. That's something that we got to get together. Nevertheless, to the question that's on hand, Lewis, do I need to? Who am I without all of y'all? I'm gonna still be me, but I prefer y'all in my life. And I don't think that I'd be a worse or better person by removing you. In fact, I would argue I'm the best that I am because of you and because of all of y'all, because of fucking Clout Jones. When I go to his music, I'll go over to a SoundCloud and I listen to his music. I'm better. It's just that little piece that I need to hear of every little person. When I tap in the Trigger Mike show and we at the office at my downtown and me and my employees and I'm piping that shit through the audio in the whole studio and they listening to Mike talk and I'm listening to the women listening to him. That's necessary. I don't want to remove that. So yes, Lewis, we are being exported and exploited. That's beyond my pay grade. I'm not sure how to fix that, but I don't want to do without it.
So I think my question would be, because I think I'm differentiating interpersonal relationships with friends and family that you specifically choose as opposed to the outward culture that influences us. For example, like Chicago, it's a violent place, right? So the way culture teaches you to behave in the city, you leave outside Chicago, you going to jail. You can't just get into it with somebody and bang 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 and then just go about your business. Like you could behave away in Chicago, you can't behave in almost 49 other states or however many states. The culture, and not in my interpersonal, my mom, my brother, or you know what I'm saying, not my inner circle, but from a cultural standpoint, there are things that you get that if you allow them to be your normal, they can negatively infect you and affect you to the point that you do need to remove yourself from those things to see the non-normality of what you operating in. Similar to traveling. I think traveling is removing yourself from the culture that you're immersed in, like you hinted to earlier, Shan, and having a cultural shock. By doing that without self-isolating, you're essentially doing the same thing because you're removing yourself from your comfort zone and sitting with who you are outside of things that make you feel comfortable. And in that is where I think you find who you are, because you're making decisions that aren't affected by the general the the general norms that are okay, as opposed to what is it that you actually want. Like people can shift beauty standards that way. They can do purchasing power that way. They can even do how people appeal to different music. You know what I mean? Because in order to like the newer generation of music, you got to step outside of the older generation, the older culture of hip hop, in order to appreciate anything that these young cats do. It's a space and a place for all of it. And I absolutely think that you don't isolate yourself from everyone at all times. I agree with you on that, right? But I definitely think that you need to, not you specifically, I'm saying like a person needs to learn who they are at their core so they can make decisions from a place of truth within them, in my
I want to
opinion.
go back to I want to go back to the word that Shannon used. It pretty much sums it up. Discernment, right? So, what you want to do is expose yourself to as much influence as possible, and you have to learn how to eat the meat and spit out the bones. Pause. So, you have to get as much exposure as possible. As why wouldn't you want that, right? At least so you know what's out there. You need to see what's out there just to be aware of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, the everything, right? So just like how you would tell your children, right? Like my method of parenting is this way. I don't hide anything from them, right? I show them things. I made sure I talked to them about, the birds and the bees early, different things, just so they know, right? I show them things. I let them see. They know who Sukiyana is. They know who Sexy Red is. They know all that, right? And I explain it to them with context because you can't hide them. You need that exposure just so at least you know what it is. But they also know what to do with it. They know what's right from wrong. They know, okay, this ain't for me. And I can explain it to them, give them that context. So if you do that with your children, they're going to understand how to look at things that they know is not the way that we do and separate themselves from that, right? So even because outside influence is always going to come. I talked them about peer pressure. I told them what the effects of this is, what the effects of drugs are, everything else, right? I took them out of the country a couple times, nothing crazy yet, but I've shown them around the world. Like I'll say, listen, this is how these people live this way. You need to see how that is. So you got to at least expose yourself to it and then do with the information what you will.
I just wanted to say something real quick. I think that we kind of got to reframe the question because is it really about culture or is it really about lack of culture? Because I think a lot of times when we have people who are being so easily influenced by the quote unquote culture, those are people who lack like a foundational culture. And I say that based off of my experience as a Caribbean American man, like, and just seeing like the differences between like Caribbean Americans and like Africans and like Latin Americans versus like straight up American born Americans. And it seems as though like a lot of the struggle that American born Americans struggle with is actually being able to define what exactly is the culture. And then it seems like a lot of what is defined as the culture, it has to do with like media. It's all about like, did you watch this movie growing up? Did you listen to this music growing up? Did you go to these places growing up? That's what you use to define your blackness. And I feel like for Americans, it seems to be a lot harder to separate from that quote unquote culture because there's no like ethnic culture to defer to. Like, if I'm feeling lost, I have a specific type of food, specific type of songs, specific type of sound, specific type of everything, dress style, things that I can go back to that I can trace back to the country that my parents came from. And I think for Americans, a lot of times they don't have that, or at least they don't know how to identify what's theirs from what's been assimilated by the culture from what's been assimilated from like the entire melting pot. So I think we got to consider that sometimes it's not really culture that's the problem, it's the lack of culture. I want to give another point too. Like we don't have this conversation about the Muslim culture. We don't think that they need to change their culture and separate from the culture as they get older. We don't have this conversation about the Jewish culture. Like the guy in the video was talking about, oh, you see my beard's not cut the way your beard is. Yeah, but in the Jewish culture, I don't know if you ever been in Brooklyn, but like all of them got the same beard. You know what I mean? All them Jewish people, they not only the same beard, they wear the same clothes. They wear the same color. They, you know what I mean? They like down to everything. It's the same. The hairstyle, it's all the same. A lot of cultures are like that. You know, you go to China, Japan. A lot of the people have similar hairstyles, similar style of dress. So I absolutely think it's a lack of culture that's the problem rather than culture.